2030, what will it be like? I'll hand over to Michael Lloyd, publisher of Shopping Centre News, who will be moderating the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I was playing golf with a mate of mine a few months ago, and he's the chief executive of one of the highest profile private hospitals in this country, and we play golf twice a week. During the course of the game, he said to me, you know, we're going to have a problem in the next few years. We need property. And I said, what? And he said, yes. He said, day surgery has become one of the most critical parts of our business. And it's rising at an exponential rate. And he said, we can't go to industrial property, and you can't just go and build a hospital. We need to be near public transport. We need to be near communities. We need the center of the community. And I said to him, what about shopping centers? And he said, that'd be ideal. You've got car parks. You're easy to get to. Now, this guy would probably pay double what a lot of our majors pay. And our society is moving towards a region that we haven't seen before. A few weeks ago, in Shopping Centre News, we ran an article online. A shopping centre in the mid-north coast of New South Wales has just opened a high school within their shopping centre. A large space, they had one. It's now a high school. It's not a total high school, but I think there are 2 years, years 9 and 10, or years 10 and 11. But it's a genuine operating high school within a shopping centre. Made me think, what's a shopping centre going to be like in 2030? And 2030 is not a decade away. 2030 is only 8.5 years. So let's come at it from the big picture, guys. The industry as a whole, where it's going, what's going to happen in broad terms over the next 8.5 years. We'll get some overviews first, and then we'll zoom in. What are the main changes we're forecasting? I want to introduce my panel. As you know, we have Phil McAbeedy from Centre Group. We have Brett from AMP, Brett Williams. We have Peter Huddle from Vicinity Centres. We've got Michelle from Stockland. We have Michael O'Brien from QIC. And we have David McNamara from Lendlease. That group in front of us, and some of the attendants here today, represent every single big gun centre in this country. About 100 odd centres and 100 odd little guns, which are just smaller than that. And representatives in this room today, senior representatives, and this panel represent every single one of those centres. So where are we going to go? David, give us your thoughts.
Look, I think your introduction was really appropriate, Michael. When I look at the retail sector, particularly after what we've gone through for the last year, we are at an inflection point. And I think the reality is a number of our big guns are probably as big as they're going to be in retail. So I think the role of the anchor is very much changing, and we've been in the business collectively of building places and attracting to those places millions of people a year. With what's going on, I think it's inevitable. You will definitely see people starting to come to these places because they are convenient, they are near great infrastructure, they are things where they can do other things. And I don't think that your analogy of the day surgery is far off. I think that is something we will see. And schools, I think education as a sector has some great synergies to place. And these are the sorts of things that, whilst they're quite revolutionary today, I think successful operators will start to unlock those. And if they can do that well, that will drive underlying returns and resilience of their retail.
Great. Michael, in line with your views?
Yeah, it is actually, and I think we collectively own these massive land parcels in these suburban CBDs, and for decades the highest and best use of any land that we controlled was adding more retail, because the demand was there, and that's served the industry, served investors exceptionally well. But the assets are now pretty much, in most cases, not all. We've got enough retail space that services that demand. We need to make that space consistently more productive, and I think there's plenty of opportunities to do that within the existing envelope. But I think the real transformational play for us is to really take advantage of those locations, the public transport connections, the road networks, the thousands of car parks that we control, to add complementary uses where we know there's demand. You're talking about healthcare, Michael, education. We know there's enormous demand for residential that feeds off the amenity of the location and the transport, suburban office, healthcare uses, a whole range of different healthcare uses, hotels. So I think the most profound change that I think we'll see in the next kind of 8 to 10 years is how those sites will evolve beyond the retail core. The way that we can densify the sites, they're extremely underdeveloped, particularly if you own strategic land parcels around the asset. So and the opportunity is just enormous. And the development pipeline, we've always had these big retail development pipelines. The development pipeline now is it can often be substantially larger than what we've seen in the past, but in terms of complementary mixed use that really maximises the opportunity of the site.
Great. Michelle?
Yeah, I think in terms of what everybody's said, we're all thinking that way. And when we start to think about COVID over the last 12 months and what it's done, it's actually accelerated our thinking and completely shifted that very traditional model of just highest and best usage being retail. So for us particularly, if we think about the customer and putting the customer first, and that's been most paramount for each of our assets and our business, we're thinking about that micro-fulfillment piece as well. And when you start to think about that digital online shopping, and everybody was locked away, all of us would have had at some point in time doing online shopping. But then we think about that bricks and mortar piece and how there is no difference between either of these. So that micro-fulfillment, and then starting to think of health and well-being. Most of us were either walking, we were wearing athleisure wear, we were doing these things that, we weren't, and we didn't have the time to do. And, that whole piece around bringing together those health and well-being precincts, and they will form anchors for our assets at some point in time. And then education, it's been something that's been talked about by the Department of Education around how do you put in high-rise education into different locations, supported by the infrastructure, supported by the growth of a population, supported by, for us particularly, we have communities that we're based in. So we don't think about just as a retail asset, we think about what is the industrial opportunity in there, what is the workplace opportunity in there for co-working, and then we think about, potentially the support, and we have that retail support in there. It's actually more blended as opposed to just being a pure bricks and mortar building.
Thanks. Peter?
Hi, Michael. My comments are very similar to my colleagues that have already spoken. Mixed use is huge for us moving forward, and we've spoken about that publicly, and particularly diverse. We don't necessarily see building a huge amount more retail space at all. It's more repurposing the existing retail space and then intensifying that use and diversifying it with bringing in other uses. Similar to Michelle's comment, I think if you really look forward into 2030, we've already seen what COVID has done to customer behaviour. And I think that's really just going to be amplified. I mean, customers have zero patience, and technology is provided for that. They want immediate gratification on products or services. They want it now, delivered, purchased at store, delivered at home, micro-fulfilled from a shopping centre. So I think where we move to in the future is really, how do you satisfy that customer relationship being amplified with technology in 2030? And then fundamentally, from our point of view, it's how do we help retailers adjust to ensure that they have all the products from a prop tech or from a property point of view, really to move that relationship into more of a strategic relationship into 2030, so we can satisfy that instant demand of essentially customers that are now omni-channel fluid.
Thanks. Do you have anything to add to that, Phil? Or?
There's a lot of topics there. Probably what I'd like to comment though is let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, we've come through COVID, our assets are in a really solid position. So, I mean, let's face it, you know, consumers, they want experience. They actually want to meet people, they want to see people, they want to touch and feel, they want instant gratification. Something like online can't duplicate. So we've got a very good product, we'll continue to be. And although we've seen a rapid acceleration in online, and you know, we've recalibrated our forecast to around 25% by 2030, you know, that's still almost $4 out of $5 that will go through a shopping centre, and that actually excludes the bricks and mortar spend too. So I think let's just remind ourselves that we actually have an asset class that is a very, very solid asset class, and I keep trying to convince our investors that, because they're the stakeholders we need them to understand. And I think the other thing we need to acknowledge, you know, on this panel and around the room too, you know, we've got an industry here that's continually evolving our assets, and this is obviously what we're leading to, but over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, we've continually evolved our assets, and we will continue to. So it is going to be a very successful asset going into the future. I think what will come out of it though is there will be the winners and the losers, and there'll be a bigger gap between the two. So I think if you're playing in that very convenient end, that everyday convenience, and then you're up at that sort of major and super regional, and you're actually servicing that convenience and everyday shop, but the broader experience, you're actually going to be very successful. And I think some of those assets in the middle that are struggling to find that role in the community may struggle. But just picking up on that, looking forward to talking about mixed use and some of the other things we're looking at.
Right. Phil, you come from a different angle.
Maybe.
Your history wasn't necessarily property.
Yeah.
And I know that your group, Centre Group, one of the largest in the world in our business, has made a specific strategy on customer focus. How do you see it from your point of view?
I mean, in a lot of ways, we're in violent agreement. Clearly,
yes.
A lot of the themes are similar. But we made a conscious decision a number of years ago to put the customer absolutely at the centre of our thinking and our business, and in some ways to actually stop thinking about being in the shopping centre business. Now, clearly, we're still playing a huge role in terms of retail. But if you think that we're competing with other shopping centres, that's going to get your mind thinking about, what do I need to do to improve my shopping centre? When you actually think what we're really competing for is the time and attention of customers, of people who've got lots of ways of getting the stuff they need right now, and they can choose to spend their time and focus their attention in lots of different ways. So whatever we create is going to have to be more attractive and more engaging than kind of any other option. You know, so with that in mind, you know, we took a step back and said, if we're going to succeed with the customer, we need to spend some time clearly understanding them, which sounds obvious, but we may have been thinking about the customer on a more superficial level. So we got serious about sort of understanding them, knowing the customer. Once you know them, if you're going to be a customer led on the journey to being a customer obsessed business, you probably better listen to them. And not by doing ad hoc surveys every now and again, but listening to them in real time, dynamic manner. And that's something we invested a lot in. Once they've spoken to you, don't ask them what they think if you're not going to do anything about it. So once we get a knowledge of who the customers are, we're listening to them in real time, change some of the design for them, and design, not reacting, but actually listening and saying, how can I make it easier for them? How can I make it more vibrant for them? And finally, with the kind of the advent of technology and social platforms, you've got to be opening up to more direct engagement with the customer. And a lot of the products and platforms we're developing now is about engaging, which then actually goes back to, it's going to help us know them, it's going to help us listen to them, and it's going to help us design. So there's a virtuous circle there.
Thanks. That was a nice overview. But I want to get into specifics. Mixed use, figured quite a bit there. You got more mixed, Michael, you've got more mixed use in Castle Hill than probably anyone. I mean, you own half the main street, or all of the main street. You've got the shopping centre, you've got railway stations, you've got bus terminuses. And surrounding your centre, you've also got other stuff. When you talk about mixed use, in 2030, what does that mean? What's your holdings going to be in 2030? A big gun centre. What's the mixed use? What does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's when I sort of got to QIC and looked at our portfolio and understood just the scale of the land holdings, and Castle Towers is a really good example, Michael. The opportunity to develop out that real estate.
Did anybody hear any of that?
It was cold.
I'm just talking about Castle Towers. The opportunity to develop out the extensive land holdings that we have is incredible, and we know that the retail we can make more productive, and repurposing some of the less productive space is a really good opportunity for us. We've connected through to the new metro rail station, which has had a significant benefit. But trying to understand what kind of composition of complementary uses where we know that there's demand in the market is actually a really challenging thing to get your head around. Because if you look around the world, there's not that many examples of a retail core being supported by a developed out and extremely successful kind of integrated mixed use precinct that's controlled by one owner. So in some ways, and there are some examples, but in some ways you're really sort of starting from scratch. So our process was really trying to understand the level of demand across the different sectors that we saw could complement the retail, and where we saw there was significant demand and development opportunities could stand on their own 2 feet. And so we did a lot of work around master plans across the key assets and understanding that composition. They're all different. The level of demand across those uses is all different. The drivers of demand are very different. And just the shape of the land is different, right? So once we kind of really worked through and understood where the demand was, we were able then to bring together the master plan. And I'm sure everybody's, we're not the only group that's been doing this. But getting that mix together and then integrating it so that it works cohesively and actually creates value for the retail core, which will always remain as the most significant value contribution across the site, is a really difficult thing. So we've started on the journey. Eastland in Melbourne, for example, we've been doing mixed use there for a little while. For the last sort of 5 or 6 years, we've got a hotel, a couple of office buildings, one under development, a library that integrates into the retail. It's only a very early stage. But I think if you can actually crack that and get those mix of uses that really work together well, service the demand, and really create that value for the retail, because you've got that captive market, the value creation is incredible. So you can work these things, these individual development opportunities, so that there is a really compelling commercial proposition and development profit, but then the extra value that it creates for the retail is significant as well. Okay. Because if you've got a captive market, a lot of the retail spend, from the people using the office building or the healthcare facility or the hotel is going back into the retail. And so there's this kind of nexus value that we can capture because of the way that the site works together. And I'm not sure if we've, with our master plans, I'm not sure if we've entirely cracked it. They're probably going to be a little bit fluid. But I think what we've got now is something that's actually really compelling. And we've looked at how much it will cost, the time frame over which we can build it out, the different types of uses, the value that it creates for the retail, and it's actually a very compelling proposition, I think. And that helps, I think I totally agree with what Brett was saying, that, we have to understand that the retail itself today, it's shown its resilience through the COVID, through the pandemic. We've seen the assets bounce back really well. Tenants are back paying full rent. So the base of performance is there, and then we can just leverage off it through these master plans.
Okay. Thanks. Brett, can you pass that down? I know it's a major part of your thinking.
Yeah, I think we're all thinking about it.
You've even got a term for it, and it's called selective mixed use.
Selective mixed use, yes.
Well, what do you see selective mixed use?
Selective mixed use. We all know each of our retail assets have got very different infrastructure, and they serve a different role. So the mixed use solution will be very different. But no doubt, looking forward to 2030, a lot of our big gun centres, you're going to see mixed use across a lot of them. There's no doubt about it. Where I think as an industry, I think we've always been very precious about retail. That sort of mixed use got pushed to the side to go, retail's the higher and better use.
What's it going to be?
Sorry?
What's it going to be?
What's it going to be? Look, we're actually delivering mixed use at the moment. So Karrinyup, we've got an $800 million project in WA. We're delivering about 330 resi apartments there, so that'll really create a true town centre. Macquarie, everyone here knows Macquarie. We've had DA approval for 99,000 square metres of mixed use over 4 towers. So we're master planning there. And what are we master planning? We're master planning build to rent. So build to rent's going to be a really stronger investment class asset in Australia by 2030, there's no doubt there. We're looking at student accommodation and shared living in one of the towers, and obviously office accommodation too, and we'll probably do residential down the track. But if you look forward at an asset like Macquarie, what you're going to see all those uses sitting above the retail. It's going to be a true town centre. And then from a value perspective, probably about 60% is going to sit with retail and 30 to 40% will be mixed use. So there's a few live examples, and we're looking across our portfolio. Clearly, the smaller assets quite often don't have that opportunity, but you may see some hospitals on some. There's plenty of opportunities out there. And as you said earlier, vertical schools. We've seen the first vertical secondary school in Parramatta that opened recently too. So you're probably going to see some schools at centres. So there's a number of usages there, and we're all working towards delivering them. But I think I have really seen from a language point of view, we're not as precious about retail. I think I agree that centres aren't going to get bigger, they're going to get better, and we're going to use these land holdings to actually complement the retail.
Okay. Peter, as custodians of Chadstone, Vicinity's already gone overboard with mixed use. You got from commercial offices, you recently opened a 4-star hotel, and you've got most of the stuff in between. That's now. What's Chadstone? And not only Chadstone. You've had experience of mixed use. What's it going to be like in 2030?
Well, Michael, I hope it's built. That's the first thing. We've been talking about it for a while. We've got a lot of plans in place. At least from COVID, you never waste a crisis. So we've been able to elevate a lot of those plans at a state level, which, to be honest, has been really productive for us because it's taken out of individual councils' sort of individual whims in terms of planning policy, and been able to elevate to a state's really created a strategic discussion. So in terms of 2030 for us, mixed use gets bandied around quite frequently, but mixed use can be a 20,000 square metre commercial building at Frankston, which we got a DA called in for and approved, but it also can be, it's as simple as large-scale medical, taking a floor plate, it's healthcare coming in and health and wellness, which Michelle was talking about, taking additional space. It's really just diversifying away from the core traditional retail products to add that diversification to use. To Phil's commentary, it's all about what the customer wants. So for us, of our 60 shopping centres, we have about 16 of them in some sort of conceptual form, master plan for larger build-outs. But we do have plans for changing space within the other shopping centres to bring in some of those simpler non-retail components, which we consider to be what we call retail-led mixed use. So for 2030, look, I'd anticipate we're somewhere in the vicinity of $3 to $4 billion invested in terms of rolling out at least 20 to 30 buildings. To Michael's point, it's really going to be coordinated in a priority order of where's going to be the most value for us as a company, but also where it resonates for a customer the most. It has to be connected to major transport. Chadstone's not necessarily connected to major transport at this point in time, hopefully not too far down the track. And it will be a mixture. And again, it comes back down to the customer thing. How do you get someone who, from an experiential point of view, another word that's bandied around, but that basically wants to come to a centre, it can shop, can socialise, can get well, can stay, can relax, can work, can stay long term, can stay short term. So fundamentally, if you roll through that whole customer need and what's highest and best use and what's in demand for every, to Brett's point, it's relative to every single trade area, then you can quite simply work out what mixed use is. I will add one more point. For the first part of my development career, we built a lot of shopping centres, and what was the most frustrating thing is about 5 or 6 years later, you go back to those shopping centres, particularly if they're connected to transport, and you see a lot of what I would consider to be lazy but opportunistic developers building right next to your shopping centres and prioritising and capitalising on the amenity that we've built. So from our point of view, why wouldn't you build that yourself if you've got the land?
Michelle, Stockland, your group, not your division, but your group is very mixed, from residential to industrial, major commercial to retail. Anything to add with what's been said?
Absolutely. I think for us as a group, we have an opportunity on the Sunshine Coast at the moment in Aura. And for us, that is an incredibly wonderful growth sector that we're seeing at the moment. We have our resi up there. We're also master planning a retail precinct there. We're also master planning industrial there. And we're looking at that. But I think, to your point, Phil, it's very much around what is it the customer wants. What is it they need? What is it? It is a growing community and there's population growth, so we need to grow with that population as well. And it's thinking about that amenity and how does that amenity work? If you think about convenience, how do we think about, today people are Uber eating, like they're ordering, their food via Uber Eats. How do we think about that from a convenience perspective? How do we think about that from then, the curation of those areas to ensuring that there is that experience around play, the work, education, that medical piece, and how do you look at those large parcels of land? And the retail sector and our retail business plays an incredibly important part in that. But then again, it's about how do we think about that mixed use piece and all of us actually working together to ensure that we deliver what the customer wants. It comes down to now not what we need to deliver, because we have built things and we have actually traditionally added on GLA, but it's really that deliverable as to what is going to be a sustainable outcome and a sustainable return for the investors as well.
Terrific. I want to focus now on the centre. I'm going to put you on the spot, you guys. Visualize a centre, a shopping centre, not the outside, not the commercial office blocks, not the residential towers above. You walk into a shopping centre in 2030. What are you going to see? Is it going to be like you look down Champs-Élysées, there's tables and chairs and it's an avenue and people are eating and drinking? Or is there going to be none of that? Is it going to be a hospital? We're fortunate today to have Phil with us, because Phil has been in the brand business for many years. He was with Nike, some of the great brands that he's been with. And his focus, the Centre Group, has shifted its focus recently to customer experience. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Phil, when you walk into a shopping centre in 2030, what's it going to look like?
Is this one working? Yeah.
We don't know, but what you...
No, if I knew that, I wouldn't be on this panel today. I'd be off investing heavily in. But you know, it's funny in some ways. Is in 2011, so exactly 10 years ago, I was asked to be on a similar panel when I was in the hospitality hotel industry.
They were 10 years ahead of us.
Yeah, you know, and it was what's the world of travel going to be like in 2020? And I called that one, didn't I? And I made sure I was out of it by the time it happened. But you know, what was interesting is we put together a full what a journey would look like in 2020, a mythical journey down to Brazil, how it was all going to interconnect. And some of that seemed like science fiction at the time. And interestingly, they asked me to come back 2 years later, and a lot of that stuff had actually already happened, and some of it's never happened. So it's kind of interesting that we can think about broad themes and then hopefully move towards them, and customers will come with us. I guess one of the things I'd like to think about 2030 is in the last year, there's been so many steadfast articles written about how people are going to behave, how things have changed forever. You know, retail's changed forever, entertainment's changed forever, education's changed forever, everything's changed forever. You don't have to go back too many months, and if you're reading any of the UK newspapers, you'll still see the articles about the handshake has gone forever. I'm not sure how many people shook hands when they came in here this afternoon, or hugged or kissed. You know, what that tells me is that there's a lot of things that are going to stay the same. And so when people talk about everything's going to change, people are pretty... It takes a lot to break people's habits.
Yeah.
People are social animals. As you said, social animals need gathering places. So our destinations, stop thinking about shopping centres, our destinations can provide those gathering places. And ultimately, this whole thought that our destinations are too distant from customers is also a complete misnomer as well. I mean, 20 million people live within 30 minutes of a Westfield centre. For millions of people, it's their closest place to go, spend time, eat, shop, etc. So we are local. And as we start thinking about what 2030 is going to look like, it's where are people spending their time? What are the things they're going to need to do? What is going to make us more magnetic than anywhere else? And a large part of it, I think, is going to echo what Brett said earlier, is something that separates us is the human connection. You know, people coming together, interacting with our staff, interacting with our retail, who I like to think about as our experience partners, not retailers, our experience partners. That sets us apart. Every time we look at what we call our CX loop, which is our customer advocacy measures, anyone who's interacted with one of our staff is going to rate their experience higher. And so that human connection shouldn't be lost. You know, for a large part of Australia, you know, we are their high street, we are their town square, we are their village green. So think about the things they're going to want in their town square or their village green in 5-10 years' time, and we can't go far wrong.
Okay. David, Lendlease has been, in its history, it's had quite a history of newness. Lendlease was the first shopping centre developer to put a glass roof on a shopping centre in Australia. It was the first one to put palm trees down the main mall. It was the first one to really create a town centre in a shopping centre. You're head of Lendlease. What do you see? What's it going to look like?
I think we were the first one to rip some of those palm trees out too. There's a downside of building a glass house.
I've got to tell the audience, I was with Lendlease and I was the guy who put them in.
I think I chopped them down when I was a centre manager at Central Plaza, Michael. But jokes aside, look, these assets will be different for every market they are in, and the challenge with any of this thinking is that we need to have tailored solutions to the markets that we're in. So, you know, it may be very different in a city environment where densification is the only way you can unlock value, to say an outlying suburban area where you have the benefit of land that you can sprawl onto. And therein, I think, lies the challenge in a lot of what we do, because many of these big assets, we've been incredibly successful building and developing retail to the point where we now use a lot of the land. And in some instances, we use most of the land. So I think our real challenge is how do we unlock a bespoke solution for each of these markets that we're in, that one is relevant to the customer. And in saying that, I think you will see a lot of repurposing of existing built form. Inevitably the changes that we've seen driven by our shifting customer demographics will inevitably see a lot less fashion in these malls. So I think from a physical presence, our reliance, which to date has been very strongly on fashion, will need to shift. And it will shift. And then the challenge is how do you unlock that accretively and deliver returns and attract capital to do that. So, I think, we've got some great examples collectively of assets that are fantastic in terms of the open space they build and offer to their communities. But similarly, there's some great urban examples of spaces that probably don't let the daylight in, but still are incredibly relevant to consumers. So therein is the challenge, I think, in terms of how you tailor a bespoke offering and do it financially in a way that investors want to keep investing.
Okay. Michelle, you waltz into a centre, what's it going to look like?
Oh, wow. It's a great question. And when you start thinking about that and you start thinking about what, digital reality is going to be for a lot of people, augmented reality within our assets. In the US, there's a site called Sheffield, and it changes out, it's a department store, and it changes out, the usages in there every 3 to 4 months. And will our assets have those type of usages? Will you walk into a store and you are only seeing one of, and then you have a screen in front of you and you can actually then shop that way? I think if we walk into a centre, it will be different. It will be very different. But I agree to Phil's perspective in terms of that human touch. We are social animals. We like to be together. We like to gather. We like to interact with people, and it's really providing those places and spaces where people can gather. However, in terms of shopping, I do believe that the repurposing of space will be there, and it really will be how we're accustoming ourselves and our centres, and as retailers change and grow as well, how they're actually meeting the demands of the customer as well in terms of what and how people will shop.
Fabulous. Michael, what's your view?
Yeah, I think the way that the
No, I'm getting you.
We're going to have really technologically advanced centres.
Microphones.
The way that the mix, our mix has evolved over the last 4 or 5 decades, in line with the way consumers, what they want to see, has been one of the great things about the industry, I think. And there are certain aspects to, we were talking about mixed use before. There are certain uses there that I think clearly there is demand and will be ongoing demand. But the way that the retail mix evolves is not as clear, and that's because we're not quite sure how the consumer is going to be thinking in 10 years' time. But what's consistently, what we've consistently seen is that there has been, as one category, for whatever reason, demand kind of drops off, there are other categories that, have come in to take their place, and in many instances have generated higher levels of productivity. So, in the last sort of decade, we've seen the rise of services across a whole range of different, particularly that sort of health and wellbeing theme. Dining has become a much more important part of the mix, and along with other, various entertainment uses. Fresh food, the strength of the supermarkets and the visitation that they generate and the benefit that creates for fresh food. The rise of the mini majors, which has been extraordinary and continues. At the same time, we've seen those traditional anchors that, we sort of always had to be part of the retail plan, department stores, discount department stores, the productivity we've seen reducing, and that format. I know those operators are trying to reinvent themselves and create sustainable business models, but
there are clearly opportunities there to assist them with, reducing their footprints and making them more productive, but which also give us options to generate higher productivity from that space where there is category strength and where there's clear demand. That to me, that's a terrific opportunity, because we know we have big spaces that really don't pay as much rent and have very low levels of productivity, that in many cases across, I'm sure, all of our portfolios, we've been able to convert into much higher levels of productivity through replacing that space with a range of uses. Mini majors have been, a number of those operators have absolutely shot the lights out, not just in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, but through the pandemic as well. Okay. So that gives us plenty of options, and the returns that we can get from undertaking that kind of repurposing can actually be very compelling. So it's hard to know what exactly that mix is going to look like in 10 years' time, because the consumer behavioural shift is hard to pick, but it almost guaranteed there will be a requirement for certain types of uses and categories that want to take that space and pay us good money for the privilege.
Okay, Peter, your portfolio is as diverse as you can get, really. You got from downtown city, tiny little shops in historical buildings like the Strand Arcade, to Chadstone. So you got a handle on this. What do you think the big gun is going to look like? What's the big gun, the regional? What's it going to look like? I walk in, what am I going to see?
I'm sort of on Michael's page. It really depends on what the customer demand is at that point in time. If I talk across our portfolio, we absolutely love buildings like QVB. We do have a completely diverse portfolio, but we think, and again, this comes down, for us, QVB is like the epitome of retail experiential. It's a beautiful heritage building, full of great executed, but unfortunately SME retailers that really are defined in particular product offering. There's a bit of luxury there, great food, there's great gift wear, wedding wear, all that type of stuff. And for us, I'd love to see pretty much the contemporary version of retailers upgrading in a heritage building, executing very similar to that offer at QVB in 2030. We think it's a timeless offer in that building, and there will always be a demand for that. Be more of a demand if international borders were open, but it'll be a demand for it nonetheless. But look, Michael, you're right. We have a diverse offer, and it really will depend upon the demand within that trade area for in 2030 for each of our centres. I mean, one of the ones that we are strong in, we think, is the premium outlet business. And so from our point of view, we think, we grew that through COVID. We purchased 50% of a shopping centre about 4 weeks into COVID, which was also perfect timing, but it's trading very well after things have opened up. And we think there is, one of the mega trends outside of the shop local. It'll be interesting to see if that still occurs in 2030, but it's definitely there for the next few years. But one is getting quality product at a value price and feeling as though you've got a bargain, but it's an aspirational bargain. So for us, we think the outlet business is a good business. Our little core convenience is a good business, which, a lot of groups in here, it's been a great business for the last few years. The super regional shopping centres, the Chadstones of the world, are basically an all-in-one offer. That will definitely become more experiential, will definitely become more mixed use. And I think the biggest thing in 2030 that will change from a customer's point of view is yes, the mix will change, and yes, there'll be more reasons to go to a shopping centre rather than just purchase product, but it'll be digitally enabled. Yeah. Okay. So it is the instant gratification, the instant search, the instant car parking, the instant delivery of goods or products, and the search that you don't even know what you're searching for will be solved at that particular point in time. The other thing that the customer won't understand is the buildings will be so advanced from a technology point of view a lot of the lifestyle costing of capital. There'll be centralisation, a lot of the services in that building. So fundamentally, we're creating a more sustainable building, taking costs out of the system, which fundamentally, hopefully, the benefit goes into obviously returns, but also a better customer experience.
Brett, your portfolio, massive under development. You've got a development pipeline that's huge. Tell me, what's it going to be? What are they going to be like?
Well, I think there's two issues here. I think experience. I mean, we're all hearing customers aren't just buying stuff; they want experience. So, I think in 2030, I think experience is being delivered on well, but we'll actually excel in that area. And what I mean by that, customers will actually come to a shopping centre, and there'll be regular entertainment, there'll be free entertainment, there'll be some form of free education. We'll create better and great community places and spaces, and 5-star service, and all those sort of layers. I think we'll get a lot better at that. And we're doing a good job of it as an industry, but I think we'll be very much more focused and an obsession on experience. And then if I look at the product, how we're looking at the product at the moment is we're looking at how do we better align the retail mix, looking towards the future, to better align with the share of wallet. So if we look at the retail bricks and mortar market at the moment, it's about 310 billion. It's interesting, in that market alone, 60 billion or 20% in furniture and hardware, so that's a market that we're not capturing. But in terms of, there's a $730 billion plus share of wallet that's going away from retail. And we're trying to work out how do we capture that. And a lot of that's pretty logical. Some of it's housing.
What'd you say that's
$730 billion.
Thank you.
And, some of that's pretty logical. It's housing, but, you've got transport, you've got health, you've got education, you've got recreation. So it's really trying to peel that back and look at whether there are any opportunities. And I suppose there's a few live opportunities. I've seen it across the office the last few weeks at AMP Capital. If we look at Indooroopilly, we're putting the first auto mall into Indooroopilly at the end of this year. That's with AP Eagers, the largest distributor of cars in Australia. Now that's going to revolutionise the way people buy and sell cars. So you're going to go into a 2,500 square metre showroom. It's not going to be a vacancy with 4 cars. It's going to be a 2-level, 2,500 square metre showroom. An innovative retailer designer is going to create a great place. They're putting in playgrounds, they're putting in cafes, and they're going to have about 10 dealerships. So Mickey O'Brien will rock up when he's in Brisbane and see a Porsche 911. They'll say, look, we've got one on the rooftop, Michael, would you like to take a drive? And he'll say yes. And then he'll go home and tell his wife that night he's bought a 911. So it's going to change the way, that purchasing a car is that planned, horrible experience. It's going to be a spontaneous purchase. So that's just one little example about that share of wallet. And I think the other thing too is what they're going to do.
Does he get a discount?
Yeah, he'll get a discount, and Range Rover Vogue for Peter as well. And the other thing too is they're going to put an auto centre, a quick service auto centre. The worst experience in life is getting your car serviced. You've got to go to some industrial area trying to work out how the hell you're going to get to work the next day or that morning. So you can pop into Indooroopilly, leave your keys, they'll service your car, you go and shop for 2 hours, maybe buy a Porsche on the way back, and then you go and pick your car up. So that's just a simple example about share of wallet. And during the week with the leasing team on Karrinyup as well, we had about 7 tenancies, and we've got an innovative, successful retailer in WA, and they're creating this wellbeing concept. And and that talks to recreation and health. So they're going to, it's sort of mind, body and soul. So they'll have a small gym component, but they'll have a studio where you can do meditation and life thinking and all those sorts of things. They'll have a whole pile of consultancy rooms where you can, just learn about nutrition, GPs, physiotherapy and all those sorts of things. So hopefully the leasing team ink a deal on that this week. But that's where we're trying to really gravitate. Look at that $730 billion market, which also talks to mixed use and housing as well.
Okay. We got the last question coming up from me to the panel. And good journalism, a lot of people think good journalism is about getting consensus of opinion. It's not. Good journalism is about controversy. And there's a major controversy in our industry right now, and we get viewpoints as a publication from all sources, We get them from all the individual companies. We get them from retailers. And we get them from all stakeholders in this business. And there are two groups that are emerging over the past 2 years. And it's very interesting in the shopping centre business. One says that the shopping centre industry should move towards a retail orientation. Omni-channel is the oft-quoted phrase. We've got to become part of this retailer omni-channel. There are partners, there are stakeholders. We do business with them. There's another group that says that's a lot of bullshit. It says we're property people and we rent shops and we rent space. And all this omni-channel stuff and all this being partners with retail, yeah, we'll help them out. Yes, we'll formulate some kind of delivery service if they want to deliver their goods. Yes, we'll do all that. But basically, we rent space. And we're not interested in forming close associationships with retailers, not because we're callous, because it's not our business. We're not retailers, we're property people. There's two camps, and I can tell you from everyday experience, you constantly hear 2 points of view. We got Phil here. You've come from both sides.
Okay.
What do you think is going to be the course of action in the next 3 to 5 years to 8 years leading up? Are we going to get closer to retailers, or are we going to move away from them?
Well, we've got to stay close, because what joins us together is a customer. We share a customer, which I was obviously going to say, because that's what I believe. But I think what we kind of need to think about is that there's a long line between what you're saying is, are we going to become a retailer or a retail advisor? No, for the very simple fact that we've got to respect that it's actually a complicated business. So I came from the decade in the footwear and apparel business, and I then joined the hotel industry. And I remember being in a meeting very early on with the head of development in the hotel side. So this is the first time I'm dealing with a real estate product developer. And he made a comment about development. He goes, yeah, it must be much easier where you came from. You just call up the factory and say, we need blue t-shirts this year. And that was his view on what it took to make. But actually, the brands that succeed in consumer goods, they know their customer, they're great at product design, they're great at product merchandising. When it comes to retail, they understand retail operations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really, really complicated. It's really specialist skills. And we'd have to be either naive or very arrogant to think that we could tell them how to do it better. And the other extreme is that it's got nothing to do with us. It's also not a sense of reality of how we've operated in the past. We don't just lease 200 square meters and then say you're on your own. I mean, figure out how you're going to get the stock in and out. Figure out how you're going to work. When we build loading docks, we have storerooms, we have processes and systems for getting product in, for getting product out. So as we move towards new ways of our experienced partners delivering for customers, whether that's fulfilling from the store, we should think about how are we going to support that delivery in the same way that we provide storerooms and loading docks, etc. So that may be about last mile fulfillment. That may be about co-warehousing. But again, it's not about telling them how to run their brand, their retail. It's about how we can support them. Because ultimately our role is to make it as simple as possible for brands, products, services to connect with a customer. And if putting the right infrastructure, systems, processes in place to help them do that, no matter how they're fulfilling, that's how we're going to interact and support the retailer.
Brett, anything to it?
I'm certainly a property person, not a technology person, I'll admit to that. But that's why we actually hire millennials into the business that actually understand the technology side of things. But our role is, to partner with retailers, but it's actually about how do we actually create great places for them to operate and draw customers to. So we play a very important role in creating that place. And then if we look at technology, it's actually how do we use technology not to necessarily help them with their online market share, but it's actually make it a more convenient and frictionless shop for our customers. And it's as simple as that.
Okay. Peter?
I'm not quite sure. I agree with both Brett and Phil. Look, fundamentally, we're not in the retailer business to be sitting on their boards, choosing their staff, choosing their product lines, understanding their cash flows. That is not our business. Our business is to facilitate that transaction between the consumer and the retailer at all levels, and to try and help them using technology, and to Brett's point, just creating places that are better than your competition to partner with your retailers. I think the relationship will move to a more strategic relationship rather than a transactional one. I think it will move to greater level of data sharing. It will take time to get to that position. There has to be a further level of trust to be built, but fundamentally it will still be a property relationship where we're hopefully delivering great product. The other key component is for a retailer, it's how we curate the whole environment, not only on the property, but also how we can prove out to a retailer that the mix around them is the best mix around them for them to be successful, and to share data on that component, as well as delivering all the technology solutions that need to occur through a digital world.
Thanks. Michelle?
Agreed. And I think for all of us, I think COVID has played an extraordinary role for us at the moment in terms of accelerating that relationship, and really that need to collaborate and work together even harder and further as we move into the future. If we think about our roles, we are, and to all three, we are the facilitator of a space, a place, a convenience, property area, and a place where people can actually gather, and we provide that opportunity for foot traffic, we provide that opportunity for convenience, and really that curation piece as well. Agreed that as we move forward, to Phil's point about knowing the customer, each retailer is so sophisticated in the knowledge of their customer base, and how do we work more strategically together to share that data, to understand how we're going to target those customers, how do we then facilitate the space and the place through the micro-fulfillment, if we need to think about what other social aspects we need to do for adjacencies to really deliver on those together. And our role as a property is to do that. But it will become a far more strategic relationship because of the sophistication, as Phil has indicated. It sits in both camps, and how do we do that together?
Michael?
Yeah, I think the importance of us understanding our retailers' business models is really crucial. It's the whole retail landscape is changing so rapidly that that multi-channel distribution model kind of globally is really, for a lot of retailers, as successful retailers, that's where they're heading. And so having probably a tighter physical store footprint, often with larger sites in the better assets, and a vibrant and really growing online model, that's the successful retailer business model, I think. So for us to understand what that means for their physical space requirements, but also how we can help them with their online fulfillment, that is incredibly important, I think. And so, the physical, we can work with them on their space requirements. What's a little bit more challenging is how we assist them on their online fulfillment. A lot of them really like the click and collect model because they obviously save a lot of money on logistics, but it also gives them an opportunity to not just, have the customer pick up what they bought online, but then to sell them other things while they're in store as well. So, but then, I think there are opportunities for us physically to help them, distribute product, that's not necessarily in store either. And we've generally not been particularly good at that. The supermarkets have had sort of, kind of collection points for a long time, but how we actually facilitate that in a way that's easier for the customer, but still brings the customer, gives the opportunity for the customer to, come in centre, I think is a bit of a challenge for us. But I think there are plenty of opportunities for us to kind of crack that nut as well.
Great. Amy?
Yeah, I think the real opportunity here, to state the obvious, is for retailers to increase turnover. So we want to provide the spaces that enable that and the tools that facilitate that. So from our perspective, online clearly is here to stay. COVID has accelerated that, and I think some of the more successful retailers operate in a bricks and clicks type environment. So what role do we play in that, and how do we facilitate that, I think, is the nut that we're all trying to solve for. A lot of people have mentioned last mile, and from Lendlease's perspective, that's certainly something that we think we can play a role in, that will facilitate opportunities for retailers to grow their revenue. And ultimately, if we can do that, then we should be able to drive better rental returns, and that's at the end of the day why we're here. So I see it very much as a facilitation for retailers, but also for consumers. And I think the other piece in all of that is, are there opportunities through a sustainability space? Are we in a space where, we're providing utilities and we're actually providing a social presence? And I think these are the things that, when we get out of COVID, there's going to be a lot more focus put back into our social responsibility.
Thanks. I'm going to take very quickly 2 questions from the audience. Anyone got a question? I got one there. You got to yell out. Why should we?
Why should we pick you as the landlord to put one of our salons in?
I haven't understood your question. I got all the flattery.
I understood it.
And I got all that. And then we got to the question. So what's the question?
We're a health and well-being retailer or service provider, as you've all said, is the future. So we're very excited about what that future looks like. And we're seeing huge opportunity for the next few years. And I guess my question is, how do we pick which one of you we go into, or how do we pick a high street instead?
Well, I can answer that without the question. It's your choice. Does anyone want to respond to that?
I'll start. I think you want to be where your customers want you to be, right? So I'm hoping that it's a Lendlease centre, but the reality is, we are going to provide experiences that hopefully attract consumers that you guys can make money off, and I think that's why we're here at the end of the day.
Anyone want to add to that? Brett?
Yeah, well, a good example, as I said, which is pretty live, was a wellbeing operator at Karrinyup that the team made a decision to actually drop the rent, to actually give away 7 tenancies and to get that operator in there. So that was a pretty commercial decision, but it was actually not a great short-term decision, but it was a right long-term decision in terms of getting that retail plan right to drive visitation to the asset that other retailers will benefit. So that would probably be a pretty good example for you if you're engaging with our leasing team to say, well, I like the AMP Capital's philosophy in terms of our usage and what we can bring to an asset.
Can I might turn that one around.
Yes.
If I might. I mean, clearly you want to connect with customers, so fish where the fish are. Last quarter of last year, we had 46 million visitors a month through our Westfield portfolio. That's in line. Importantly, in line with the same period in 2019. So this idea that people aren't going to go out is, frankly, to use your word, Michael, bullshit. They want to go back to physical destinations, fish where the fish are, 46 million a month, come talk to our leasing team at the end.
I got another question from there.
Question for Peter. Analysing your Western Australian shopping centres and the blowout in cap rates over the last 6 months, given their performance through COVID, well, it's true, 25 to 50 basis points. Do you see that contracting back, given they're almost COVID-free and a bigger advantage over the other Australian jurisdictions?
This is a tough audience, mate.
It is. I sort of only heard half the question because Simon Vanderbilt was laughing so hard halfway through that question. Look, WA is tough. Look, the reality is WA is COVID-free, has been to a large degree, and I'm sure the rest of this panel up here and three-quarters of the audience will say, yeah, sales seem to have been rebounded, but by category it's still really choppy. So yeah, the non-discretionary components have flown, traded very well in WA, but there's still some conservatism there. And on top of that, my friend next to me, who's building a really large asset. We built a really large asset. Unfortunately, the industry's oversupplied into WA after the caps were released a number of years ago. So I think it's going to take a little while and again, this is, the market's changed quicker than the industry's changed. So we've built, and so it'll take a while for that absorption to be filled up, even though, there's some great assets like carrying out that's being built over there at the moment. My sense is that, that cap rates have stabilised, but it really will depend upon recovery profiles and how much more retail gets built in the market area.
I have a swing too. I think the question was to you, but I think we've got to acknowledge too that retail. If you look in the wholesale fund world, we've written down retail assets by about 20% over the last 18 months. So there's been a bit of a reset, and I think that actually positions ourselves well going forward. And we had an investor forum last night, and some of the questions were, do you want to invest, should we be investing in retail over the next 2 years, or office or logistics? And the way I look at that, we're looking at retail and we're talking about 2030. Retail fulfill all of that. You invest in retail, you're getting office, and you're actually getting last mile logistics. So I think the lens of a retail shopping centre needs to be looked at quite differently, particularly when you're getting logistics portfolios that are about to trade at sub 4%. So I think retail as an asset class is starting to look tremendous value.
Great. I'll take one more.
Vanderbilt.
Question for Michael O'Brien. I'm interested to understand what the Catterton tie-up in Redondo Beach in...
Can you start again?
Sorry. Question for Michael O'Brien. I'm interested to understand, you guys recently announced a tie-up with Catterton Real Estate in Redondo Beach in Los Angeles, South LA. Really interesting idea. What is the motivation behind it, and what do you guys think you will deliver as a consequence of it?
Yeah, it's L. Catterton is the sort of private equity, L. Catterton Real Estate of the L. Catterton Group, which owns a whole bunch of retail brands globally, as you know, Simon. South Bay Galleria is the asset that we own in LA with LCRE. It's a incredible market. I mean, the number of people in LA, I think in just a couple of counties, is the population of Australia. It's very wealthy. So the asset itself, has plenty of opportunity to, to make it more productive. But it's really, the development play there is really all around mixed use. It's a great residential area. There's opportunities for hotel and office. So a little bit, very similar to what we've been talking about in terms of the opportunity with our Australian assets. But it's an incredible piece of real estate. And so they see the opportunity for development, but I think also to house a number of their brands as well. And they've been a terrific partner for us to date. So, the US has been tough. It has been hit much harder in terms of the retail landscape than what we've experienced here. And they're still going through that. I mean, the infection rates are still very high there, although they are rolling out the vaccine very quickly. So hopefully we can get that landscape, the whole, the trading performance of the assets back to an even keel in the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Thanks. Scentre Group is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, shopping centre development companies, management companies in the world. And Peter Allen just recently made a switch to not calling them shopping centres, to calling them living centres, and put a total focus on customer relations. And Phil McAveety, who's directing that, is the the Director of Customer Relations, came here today to be on this panel. AMP have got a massive portfolio of shopping centres, some of the most powerful assets in the country. And the head of retail, the head of all that shopping centre, Brett Williams, came with us today to sit on this panel. Everybody knows Vicinity. They've got a portfolio that is just massive. The second most valuable portfolio in Australia, controlling assets like Chadstone, QVB, Strand, and so on. And he joined us today. Michelle Abbey is head of retail of Stockland, the company that came from Mini and Little Guns 30 years ago and built a portfolio to an incredibly powerful portfolio, big guns, little guns, and even mini guns today. And she's head of retail and she came to join us today. QIC needs no introduction. QIC Global Real Estate is one of the most powerful and responsible and expert global real estate companies in the world. And the head of QIC Global Real Estate came to see us today, sat on this panel. And Lendlease needs no introduction to anyone. It was one of the most powerful property development groups in the world. It's certainly one of the most powerful in the Southern Hemisphere. And it built a portfolio of retail over the years, and it still has one of the most successful portfolio. And David McNamara, who's head of that company, came to join us today. These are really incredible, high-profile people, and I want to thank them for your time here today and your efforts. And I think you guys are privileged to be in this room. Give them a hand. Thanks, guys. Thank you. That concludes our forecast. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
What? What? Oh, yeah, I want to do. Hello. Am I live? Am I live? Just before you leave, I've omitted something that I should have done. I'd like you to take your seats. SEN put this on today, and it was in response to basically an overwhelming demand for this industry to get together. And a company that joined us at Shopping Centre News some years ago, almost became a strategic partner in publication, but has infiltrated this industry like no other and has developed an expertise in the shopping centre industry and become as professional as the people who are in it and as you saw today. It's Mainline. And I'd like to introduce Robert Doust, who co-sponsored this event today, and I'd like him to say a few words. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Leanne, and to all the people at Shopping Centre News for putting on this afternoon. It's always a wonderful event, and we were absolutely thrilled to be invited to be part of it. As you say, Michael, fantastic panel, fantastic insights. I think we all probably took something out of it. I know what I heard. I heard lots of shopping centres need to be evolved and changed and adjusted, and lots of new buildings. So it was fantastic from our end. And while we're talking about fantastic things, just quickly, it's an interesting room today. This is the busiest room that I reckon we've seen for probably a year. And it's actually quite amazing if you think about it. This is probably one of the very few places in the world where you can meet like this right now. And so despite all of that horrible stuff that's going on in Canberra at the moment and all of the terrible, ordinary, whatever you want to call them, decisions that have been made, The leaders of this country, I think, have done collectively an outstanding job making some really tough calls, which none of us would have really wanted to make. But they've kept us all safe and they've allowed us to get back into normal. And I think we're all seeing the economy's nowhere near as bad as what we thought it might have been. So well done to all of them. So as I said, it's our privilege to have helped sponsor today. Just very quickly, about a year ago, we came back from a little strategy workshop, a 5-year workshop where you throw everything up in the air and decide what you're going to do. And the first decision we made was that we were going to maintain our commitment to retail and retail construction. It's what we've always done, it's what we love doing, and we believe in retail. So that was the first decision that came back, and after that I'm not sure how many more decisions we needed to really make, but that's why we're here today. So thank you. Let's hope the sun keeps shining. Thank you again to Shopping Centre News, and I wish everyone a wonderful weekend. Cheers.